Welcome to Tech to Table, Growing Cleveland's Future, a five-part podcast series showcasing the Precision Urban Agricultural Initiative led by the Ohio Aerospace Institute in partnership with Parallax Advanced Research, and with financial assistance awarded via 6ONAND24D146 from the U.S. Department of Commerce, National Institute of Standards and Technology. This podcast is produced at Cleveland State's University School of Communication in the Levin College of Public Affairs and Education, and is designed to inform, inspire, and engage Cleveland's urban farmers, technologists, and community leaders. Each episode highlights the role of innovation in local food systems, lifting up both historical context and present-day tech demonstration projects. I'm your host, Anthony Gillespie, the Director of Strategic and Technology-Based Partnerships in the Tech Transfer Office at Parallax Advanced Research in the Ohio Aerospace Institute. I have over 34 years of experience leading programs in technology transfer and commercialization across government, academia, and industry. In Episode 3, Smart Farming in the City Tech Demo Projects, we're exploring the cutting-edge technologies, pilot projects, and real-world demonstrations that are helping Cleveland's urban farmers grow more efficiently and equitably. We'll hear from LANDWERX, our National Agricultural Innovation Hub partner, who provides cutting-edge technologies, pilot support, and a national network to help advance the Precision Urban Agricultural Initiative in Cleveland. Let's dig in. I'm excited to be joined today by Brad Chedister, founder, director, and chairman of LANDWERX Innovation Platform. Brad, welcome.
Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you for the gracious intro. It's good to be here with you. It's humbling. Appreciate it.
Yes, and we're pleased to have you here to really as part of our podcast here. So let's jump into things here and learn a little bit more. So can you tell us a little bit more as far as, what inspired you to launch LANDWERX, and how did that experience in national security and technology innovation influence this mission?
Yeah, well, yeah, thanks for the question. And like I said, it's been a humbling experience, and it's an honor to serve and work alongside and serve those who serve us in our freedom. So appreciate the opportunity to be here. So yeah, great question. What inspired LANDWERX to kind of get up and going, as I like to say? Yeah, I've had the really good fortune, like you mentioned in the intro, to be working alongside and able to work with a lot of folks like Special Operations Command, Intelligence Community, Department of Defense, and a lot of our nation's finest. And so in that, what we love to call them, we've had a lot of voluntold situations. So I had a lot of voluntold situation where I was volunteered and told to go and do things by some great mentors. And in that, part of those were setting up a very large innovation ecosystem and implementing different process tools and platforms in order to serve larger scale ecosystems for academia, industry, and government needs, right? And a lot of it was pointed towards national security. LANDWERX came about because as I was kind of, helping to facilitate these things and lead these things and work collectively with our government, it became more and more evident that, agricultural security was directly tied to national security implications, right? So food security, land security is national security. And the more and more we got entrenched with things like Special Operations Command and others, the more the mission kind of cross-section started being more evident, right? And so I had a really good chance encounter with a very good friend who I can call friend now, but he was a leader in the ag space who led, him and his organization led one of the largest farmer-led cooperatives in Middle America. It was, in particular, it's the Landis Cooperative. So some of the key leaders in Landis, namely the CEO of Landis at the time, visited one of the innovation hubs that I was helping to facilitate. And in doing that, him and I struck up a conversation. We started talking more and more, and we kind of said, agricultural, members and farmers are kind of like the tier one special operators out on the edge that are kind of fighting the good fight for our country every day out in the fields, out in the ag services and the agri community. And so why aren't they empowered with the same novel processes, procedures, and everything else that we, hope to empower our war fighters and our elite with? And so that question really kind of started keeping me up at night, and we decided to do something about it. And so myself and a couple of the ag leaders got together and we started the idea of, kind of like you've heard of some of these other innovation hubs that are popping up. The Air Force has AFWERX and things like that, which we were, myself and others were graciously on the ground floor helping set up. We decided, myself and some of the ag leaders decided this was a great opportunity to serve an underserved community with novel processes, procedures, and connections for national security and agricultural impact. And so that's what LANDWERX is. And that's kind of where it came from. So there's a passion to do good for the people that do great for us.
Yeah, and that's exciting. I mean, you saw a need as far as in the marketplace here, and you had a framework as far as a lot of these different models here. With respect to really looking at innovation and then just LandWorks itself as far as innovation hub, really what, for what folks who don't necessarily know, what is the innovation platform? Kind of what is it simply, for them?
Sure. No, great question. Baseline question is a good one. So,
Mhm.
and I'll lovingly, cheekily say, it is what you make it. But let's take it from the beginning. So, LandWorks in particular was a partnering agreement that myself and some others set up with a nonprofit partner and an agricultural partner, right? And that agricultural partner being Landis was the startup. So LandWorks since has become its own entity and is kind of growing leaps and bounds, which is great to support lots of great stuff. But as a platform, think of it as an intermediary or a neutral party that hopes to and strives to empower end users, problem havers, and problem solvers to have purposeful collisions together, right? And what I mean by that, that's a lot of innovation allow words all mixed in one sentence. But basically, we're helping to identify problems, give a voice in a process to those problems to be brought to the forefront, and then provide an avenue and a platform for potential solutions to be identified and then implemented or developed further with the problem havers. So basically, like I said before, farmers are at the bleeding edge, right? They're at the tip of the spear, as we call it, in our fight for agricultural security and everything for our country. So we want to empower them with known and proven processes to bring their problems in, bring their novel solutions in. These are some of the best agricultural MacGyvers in the world that solve problems on their own farms. Bring those novel solutions in, get with different companies, government entities, academia partners to develop those ideas further, and then be able to commercialize them out, be able to, implement novel things to problems that they find, right? Take commercial off the shelf solutions, take government solutions, develop new solutions, and be able to implement them at the point of impact and the point of need. So LandWorks is the platform to bring all those together. I love the word purposeful collision. So collide them in a purposeful way together, make sure that there's a pathway for development, and then kind of make the product happen, right? Make the solution fit and make the problem kind of go away or grow into other innovative solutions. So we're the platform to make that happen, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I like really your description here. You talk about purposeful collision and really bringing ecosystem players together, and then really looking at how can you create solutions here. I guess I want to drill down a little bit more as far as kind of you talked about the overall framework here, but folks will say that there are players in the ecosystem who play in a lot of those areas that you provide with your platform. I guess, one thing that, we probably want to address up front is really what, makes LandWorks different from other agricultural hubs.
Yeah, it's a good question. So one thing that makes us different is we have a massive amount of neutrality, right? So a lot of agricultural hubs, and for all the right reasons, right? So they belong to companies of like ag companies, right? So we don't belong to any ag company. We're here to serve all of ag and national security. And so that's a unique kind of characteristic that, we're not tied to the productization or putting things on the shelf for one company to form a profit off of, novel grain or seed or anything like that or product, right? We want to help the agricultural community, whether you're an industry partner, whether you're a government entity in the intelligence community, the Department of Defense, anything like that. We want to help, or academia, we want to help the best and brightest kind of get to novel solutions. So, one key differentiating factor is neutrality. So we're not really serving any one master of sorts. We're trying to serve the ecosystem writ large. Two is it's a proven process through, novel partnerships that myself and some others have established with Department of Defense and others. So this isn't one of those go alone type things, right? So we've leveraged a lot of relationships that exist with Department of Defense, the intelligence community, and others, and a large academia network, one of the largest ecosystems for national security in the world. So that ecosystem to be leveraged and pointed at problems and empowering agricultural impact is a differentiating factor. It's not, like I said, focused on one company and one product. It's focused on helping all achieve. So think of this as the tide that's going to lift all the boats. And so that's, some key differentiating factors. But there are similar innovation, platforms that exist. John Deere has some great stuff. Nutrien, Corteva, Landis, and others. This is like, again, the tide to lift all boats. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah, it does definitely. And given your reach and given your mission here, definitely broad reach, and then a lot of partners that you're working. And then you think about just the ag industry. It's a lot of players who are involved from the supply side, where the farmers are really producing goods, all the way out to more of the demand side, where they're bringing and providing, food resources to the marketplace. So it's a lot of players involved. And then the role that LANDWERX is playing as that neutral party really helps pull these respective players together in the marketplace
Absolutely.
here. And so just really kind of trying to bring a little more to help people see how the role that LANDWERX plays here. Can you give some examples of just how you've worked with either, specifically maybe on the national security side with respect to food, or it could be with academia and bringing various stakeholders together? And you may want to focus on one area. I know you'll get involved as far as, the network piece kind of in itself could be one thread as far as the partners involved, or the technology piece may be involved, or it may be partners who don't know each other. But can you present a few examples of how you work with players?
Absolutely. No, that's a great question. So some tangible examples of we actually have had some great ones. To be very fortunate and blessed to work with good problem owners and problem havers and good problem solvers. So I'll give a good tangible example. So there was a need out of a large farmer-led cooperative. So 5,000 plus member cooperative across the Midwest, and one of the needs was that they brought to us to the innovation hub of LANDWERX was, hey, they need a better way to bring disparate information sources across the agricultural kind of sector together to form somewhat of a kind of like a collation or a collaboration of info to give them, better lean in on when to harvest, when to crop, when to plant, when to seed, all the different things that, that the farming community needed to do. And so we kind of took that in, and myself and some others that have, the background of running a lot of stuff for DoD, we said, it sounds like you guys want a common operating picture for agricultural impact based upon disparate information coming from multiple different sensors and outputs. And they said, that's exactly right. And so this is where the uniqueness again of LANDWERX comes in. It's kind of that collision between, a lot of past history of working with Department of Defense and government problems and intelligence community problems, but also being able to take problems from the agricultural sector. And so what we did was we basically canvassed out and we said, all right, we're going to have some meetings with farmers and growers to really understand their problem set. They brought it in, and several farmers came in and they said, hey, we have this many thousands of acres or hundreds of thousands of acres. These are the problems we have. Yeah, we have all this information. We need to know when the right time, like we want to know if we have, crops or dollar weed or something creeping into our farms, and be able to identify that and do something about it. And so the more and more we kind of had the problem havers and the owners and the ag experts come in and talk with us, we started forming what the push out to the ecosystem really would be. And what that turned out to be was, hey, we're looking for a tech company or an organization that can form that common operating picture, take multiple inputs and give them a feed where they can see on their tablets, so they don't have to go and use their almanac and their pen and paper anymore. And so out of that, there was a product actually produced. It was a company that we found that had done business in the past with the Department of Defense. They do great work. It's called Tesseract. So I'm happy to call them out in a good way. So Tesseract Ventures is a novel company led by John Boucard and Helena Boucard. Great people. So they're out of Kansas. So based out of Kansas. And this company, they do a lot in construction. They do a lot with Department of Defense and government things. They make really cool drones, but they also, their bread and butter is taking information using small sensors and robotics and bringing that information together to give patterns, to give causal things, right? So Tesseract built a system that basically takes a lot of sensor-fed data, weather data, satellite feed data, and creates a common operating picture that a farmer can, on a tablet, take a look at their land, their farm, their agricultural impact and say, hey, I want predictive analytics to inform interventional techniques of the future for better sustainability for my farm. Or I want to know when I have to order this type of grain or fertilizer, or I want to know when I should be looking at harvesting. So Tesseract Synthesis was created through LANDWERX to be a system to empower farmers, growers, and agricultural experts for agronomy to understand and better visualize and depict data impacts for their farm and for their growing behavior. So things like that, and those have to do with not just rural farming in Iowa and other states like that, but that has to do directly with how do you create these novel platforms and these software systems and sensor systems and novel sensors to then empower urban agriculture, to empower the next generation of farmers and growers. How do you bring the future of the next generation of farmers into the age of data, and then overlay AI and everything else? So that's one example, a good collation, and that was all facilitated through LANDWERX. So we're happy to be the neutral intermediary to make things like that happen with great companies like them.
Yeah, and that's exciting to really hear how LANDWERX played that role of the facilitator between, innovator of technology to provide a solution to farmers to meet their needs. I guess, one question here, though, as far as playing that neutral party here, even in this example here, how does LANDWERX really, if I'm a farmer, maybe, I've done things a certain way for generations, or maybe I'm new and I've pretty much done my study in a specific space, or maybe I've just learned on my own. A lot of times folks will pretty much, and working in this space, see ag as an industry that doesn't always take a lot of emerging technologies and use it for efficiency or use it to help create benefit.
Mm-hmm.
And so how does a LANDWERX work with maybe a reluctant farmer, or maybe someone who may not necessarily know, and they connect them up with a player like a Tesseract and say, hey, I have a solution? How do you play that role as that neutral player? Just for the audience out here, just to help them understand, that role of the intermediary. That is part of your work as well.
Yeah, of course. That's a great question and a good lead in here. So people always ask, like, when do you get end users involved? And my answer is early, often, and always, right? So for example, using an example I gave of Tesseract Synthesis, all of that was farmer grower led and driven conversation to develop what they wanted to see as a common operating picture. It wasn't what myself or any of the staff of LANDWERX wanted to see. We were there to facilitate the conversation, to make sure that the farmer, the grower, the end user, the agronomist was getting the information and getting the development pipeline that they expected to see that would be useful to them in the future. You're right. I mean, a lot of this stuff, what I've learned over the years of doing this, I've had a lot of gracious mentors and good leaders that have had a lot of patience with me and my hard-headedness. But one thing I've learned is you can't force ideas. The best idea doesn't always win. You can't force adoption. But what you can do is provide pathways and that good cohesion and collaboration to allow end users to, one, understand what the needs are and have a coalition of the willing to lean into it. Two, get together so they have collaborative index with each other to make sure that you're not just solving one specific problem for one specific entity, but you're getting at root causes. What I like to say is you're not, you're not curing a symptom, you're going after the disease, right? And so these, LandWERX is a platform, and the whole push into this is to, one, identify problems from the problem havers, like I love to call them, super simple speak, right? You get the desirements and you say, hey, we're going to go after things that you're asking for, not just chase shiny objects. We're not in it for innovation theater. Participation is not so much the metric that you want to be basing all your activity on. You want impacts, right? You want transitions of things to end users that actually employ the solutions that help them be progressive or help them be successful in whatever they're doing. In this case, farming, ag, food security, land security, national security. So yeah, it is a cultural push. Any innovation platform that you set up, no matter what your industry is, no matter where you are or what your vertical is, you have to always remember that you're in humble servant, humble servitude towards people that have desirements and needs. As long as you keep that at the forefront of your mind, LandWERX is here to serve national security, serve our country, make us less reliant on foreign entities when it comes to really important things like our land security, food security, logistical chain, food supply, things like that, but also help that farmer at the point of impact solve their problem, right? And if it's just helping them coordinate with each other more, great. We're here to help them have better coordination with each other. If it's helping them to build an ecosystem or community around a problem set, to identify and understand what exists, what kind of, the state of the art is. And then after that, it's also saying, all right, great. You understand what the state of the art is, that's how to employ what exists today. What is the art of the possible about what could be done tomorrow to make sure you don't have these problems in the future? For future generations of farmers, for your kids, for their kids. So we actually had a good progression of ag, tech, national security implications. So yeah, it is the cultural push. But again, the way you do it is early, often, always involve the end users. They are the owners. They will take that from infancy all the way to progression of full-grown adult, solution. Keeping them involved is the most important thing behind all of this.
Yeah. Yeah. And you brought up a good point here. And this is kind of in general as far as overall, and see if you agree with this point, but you're not letting the technology drive the implementation here. It is really understanding where the market is, the market users are within the industry, and you're letting that bring you back to really finding solutions that can meet the needs in the market space here. And so,
Yep,
uh,
exactly. We're not here to fit square pegs in round holes. If they give us round holes, we will find round pegs and then we'll make them make the problem havers aware of the potential future implications as well. But we're here to solve problems that are brought into the ecosystem. Correct.
yeah, yeah, and one of the things, and you mentioned earlier, being that neutral player, you're coming in and you're listening to and meeting with folks as far as who may have a potential interest in certain times. And you're saying, okay, what are your needs? What are some of the challenges that you're experiencing? And then based upon that, that's how you pretty much will really be that neutral party to work with them to say, here's the possibilities with respect to innovation, or it may be through a partnership perspective. It may not really be a actual technology innovation. It could be a partner just really supply being there to meet their needs as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. You mentioned it before. I mean, one of the key aspects of all this is the supply and demand, understanding the demand in order to get at the right type of supply to satiate that demand. That's what this platform is for. And yeah, we want to lean into the future to give them like, hey, what if you could type things, right? It's one of my favorite statements. I always like to lead stuff with, hey, what if you could, not you can't because. But if you lean into conversations with, well, what if you could identify a novel solution to present a common operating picture for the future of farmers to bring disparate information sources together, and then overlay AI into that to give our farmers a competitive advantage edge over the near peer grower adversaries. That is kind of where the world that we want to be in, and that kind of teeter totter of solving the hard problems, also letting them know of the art of the possible. And so letting them, the users, the ag experts and the farmers and the growers and the national security experts that we have in our country lead the way, and us being a service, a humble servant to that.
Yeah. Yeah. So kind of one of the things I know we spent talking about really kind of looking at, LandWERX itself as an entity, kind of its platform, really kind of how you work with players here. But just transitioning a little bit, and this show is really about really discussing how could technology solutions be a benefit to the community out here, in particular folks who are looking at ag and urban ag here. Just what are some of the opportunities based upon conversations you're having here? Maybe, two or three areas that you see that maybe are going to be needs moving out, or you may say, hey, here's the current space.
Yeah. No.
And we're going to build upon those areas. So what are some areas of focus, I guess, to keep it simple here, for LANDWERX when you
Yeah, of
look at
course.
solutions?
Yeah, for urban ag in particular, there's some great kind of novelties that are coming to bear, and a lot of it is data driven. So data driven farming, giving predictive analytics to inform, like I mentioned, interventional techniques for urban ag, sharing lessons learned, having systems that share sensorized data. So even simple things like soil sensors that are able to kind of link in wirelessly and then share information to an overarching kind of cloud-based system that then gives best practices or gives predictive analytics of like, hey, this soil substrate or this fertilizer is best for this area of interest in urban ag, or it's basically, I think a lot of it is bringing, like I mentioned before, that's why Tesseract was such an interesting project that we ran, is bringing disparate information sources but also disparate technologies together to actually empower urban ag farmers and rural farmers and kind of that food security aspect. So I think a lot of it has to do with the identification of and implementation of novel concepts that are, people always talk about dual use, like dual use technologies, dual purpose. I think it's multi-use, right? There's more than a couple uses for these things. You might have a water sensor that's used by, the Coast Guard that also might be a good ground-based sensor, what also might be a good soil-based sensor that actually communicates in a mesh network across a city infrastructure to actually help people help each other on how to grow better when it comes to, hey, your home garden, or hey, your vertical farming initiatives, or hey, this is how much water or soil impact should be having based upon the weather patterns or geospatial things. So I think a lot of it has to do, that's a lot of words, but a lot of it has to do with disparate information, collating that disparate information, overlaying some of these, I'll call them data omics type things together. I also think a lot of it has to do with communication. So establishing that good framework of community-based knowledge around different best practices and novel techniques, procedures, and technologies that are available to urban ag farmers. I think, not knowing what you don't know, I think that a platform like LANDWERX in conjunction with, Parallax and some other great partners are able to kind of bring these farmers together to have best practices and then understand what type of technology exists or what type of easy implementable technology needs to be developed for the next gen of urban ag to be successful. And so I think a lot of it has to do with that. A lot of it, I mean, obviously we're in the age of AI and machine learning and all the fun stuff going on. I think that's an empowering factor for the future of ag if harnessed and used correctly. I also think novel power and energy, we have close ties with the Department of Energy, and there's some large scale initiatives going on for, renewable energy sources and a bunch of other things. So we want to make sure that, you know, urban ag and the future of urban ag is sustainable. We want to make sure it's productive. We want to make sure, that it's fun. It's technologically advanced, that it also brings our youth into the future of farming and doesn't kind of revert back to, hey, this is the way it's always been done, so this is the hard trudge we have uphill at some of this stuff. Like, no, let's empower our future generations with novel new things and novel tech. So I think there's a lot to it, but data leads the way, and then a lot of it is, bringing the community together to have them understand and implement novel tech solutions.
Yeah, and you brought up a point I kind of want to follow up on that where you mentioned as far as the word, empowering. Ag as an industry typically it's been all about scale.
Mhm.
And those are the players who typically would drive a lot of the development there. It sounds like here, and you correct me if I'm wrong, to a certain degree, then there's an opportunity for all now, empowerment through some of the technological advances. You mentioned AI. You mentioned really kind of communication of just novel techniques. Just because we have a means of sharing that information from one now to many using the internet and other means. And then that last piece really as far as dual use, techniques, dual use technologies here, where it may have a government application, a technology or innovation may have a need for in the government sector, but it also could have a consumer use, or maybe it'd be used to assist from business transactions here. And so I guess I just wanted to get your response here a little bit as far as just this idea of, now farming may not, some of the players now who may have opportunities here may not necessarily be those brand names that you would think of now, just because of just some of the innovation that's happening.
No, absolutely. I think you're spot on. I mean, a part of this is empowering the non-traditionals, right? The mom and
Mhm.
pops, the startups, the small businesses, the garage tinkerers, the novel urban agricultural experts, right? And innovators. And so that's the bread and butter here. That's what we want to do. Like it's not just because you know about a solution that's going to be the solution you have to implement. It's the unknown solutions. It's the best solutions. It's the novel things that come forward, not just the ones you see on the shelf, right? And so I mean, there's a flip side of this too. There's the identification of different things in response to needs. There's also using LANDWERX as a platform. So if you're a novel, if you're a novel thinker and you're a tinkerer and you love doing this stuff and you're an urban ag farmer and you figured out some novel way to, I don't know, hook a paperclip up to a soil sensor to a weather monitor, and you think you have something that, you really are excited about, LandWorks is here as a platform to bring your ideas in, and we will help you establish potentially a commercialization pathway, potentially developing novel technologies. And that's why, we have a platform that I started up in LandWorks called IP Farmer. And what that means is if you're a farmer, you're an ag expert, and you develop some novel solution out in your field, and you want to bring that in and see if that there's a commercializable potential and LandWorks isn't here to take your IP. We're here to empower you to be a developer, to potentially create your own business, to help other farmers with your novel solutions, to trademark it, go and develop something awesome. And if the government wants to, interact with you and fund you, identify potential there. So it's kind of like a two-sided launch platform of like, we're here to solve problems that you bring to the forefront. And we're also here to take a look at your novel solutions that you develop in response to your own problems and see if we can help you develop those. Again, we're not in it for the IP. You retain your IP. We're here as a platform to help you create and empower you. And so I think, yeah, the non-traditionals play a huge part of it. I mean, that's part of the big push for our federal government to national security is like we have to bring these non-traditional small businesses and creators together, all pressing and pushing the right way to make our country a great place and a leading place for ag inputs, ag intelligence, and ag solutions.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's excellent that you mentioned, Brad, as far as, I was getting excited as far as hearing that the platform that you have, the role you play as far as really playing that neutral party and bringing players together. But if I'm an urban farmer, I may be just getting started, or I've been in business for a while. I have a novel idea, or maybe I'm looking for a solution. And, one, I may not necessarily have, the revenue to afford the service. That's the first thing. And then secondly, I may, my idea, I may have had this. It may have been a trade secret that I've been keeping. And I don't want to lose that knowledge, that know-how to someone. And so you mentioned as far as kind of the know-how piece and the IP piece that you won't take rights if a company has an interest in demonstrating what they're doing, innovation in that space. I guess the other piece is just really, how do you work? Is there, if I want to really work with IP Farmer and put something out here, will you charge me? And then down the road, let's say I capitalize on the opportunity, are you going to want some royalties? So how do you work with potential collaborators
Yeah,
with some of your methods, some of your
great.
programs?
Yeah, great question. So as we head into this, so IP Farmer is a rather new solution set. So as we head into it, we're kind of crafting the business methodology behind it. But the basics of it are we're never going to be injurious, whether it's financially or intellectual property wise, injurious to the developer, the farmer, the small business, the non-traditional. That's not what this platform is for. It's here, like we said, we use this word so many times, and I truly mean it. It's here to empower that. So in conjunction with some good government partners. So there's, we'll have government funded type activities rolling through for novel development and push out of things that could be commercialized out and help the populace and help the people. We'll also have the ability to take in those great ideas and say, hey, let's help you through the process. And where are you? Do you have a trademark? Have you filed for your IP? Or is this just a napkin sketch that you just came up with? Let us help you get down the pipeline. And basically, LANDWERX is kind of that umbrella organization that brings in the type of services, tools, processes, and procedures that serves those abilities, right? So what I mean by that is if you're a farmer and you're an urban ag specialist and that's what you do and that's your hobby, you develop something novel like we mentioned before and you bring it in, we want to make sure that one, your rights are protected. You have a platform you can push your idea in. We can do some market research to help you identify and make sure that, hey, yeah, that exists, or hey, that doesn't exist. Oh my gosh, and then we can actually match you if this is your desire, and we can match you against companies or some legal aspects or different places that want or desire that type of technology and can either help you co-develop, maybe have some government opportunity for funding and development and grant structure. So we're trying to, that's part of the platform and the setup structure that we're creating is to give you opportunity. This is an opportunity zone to bring your ideas in. And for the federal government, national security, and all of that, for the ag sector, this is a platform to empower our country to be world leaders, but also work with international partners as well to make sure we have kind of that forefront of ag and national security aspect. So yeah, it's in setup. IP Farmer is kind of in flux mode in the greatest kind of way, but we've already we have a thing called Tech Thursday and some other things that are on our site that we're kind of revamping as we speak. So as those get up and going, I'll be happy to share with you and your listeners and everyone else. And it's a great way to get your ideas in front of folks, get your ideas in front of potential funders, potential, ag expertise. Say, hey, I've had a novel idea. This is exactly what I want to do. I want to help other farmers. I want to see if I can develop this thing. So that's what LANDWERX as a platform will be able to help you do.
Yeah, and just so folks, so the audience knows, typically your method is you're looking for novel ideas, and usually what they would do is regardless of the method, LANDWERX does this through their platform here. Just as far as IP Farmer, for example, it will be a non-proprietary description is how you start the conversation.
Yep. Yep. We'll be as open kimono as you like. We say keep in mind as you're presenting to like things like this Tech Thursday and everything, make sure that you understand that you're telling your ideas to other people, to other co-developers and other folks. But if you're looking to collaborate and share and say, hey, who wants to work with me on this problem? That's kind of what it's for. And there'll be government entities in there to listen to it. There'll be others, and they say that's a great idea. We'd like to discuss more. Then you can have one-on-one conversations. But again, LANDWERX never really wants to get into the middle of, your IP or your great ideas, unless you want to kind of work with us in the development of that, which we're happy to assist as a service.
Yeah, and it's building that relationship. So it starts off just like any new relationship here, a business relationship. You have to get to know your partner. And so starting off, you may have an innovation and you may say, hey, I think, at a high level, this is what I'm doing. You have additional conversations, and then it gets to a point where you're looking at really defining the boundaries here on how much information you want to share. And then maybe beyond that, if you come to agreement on how much information that you're sharing, then you start looking at really executing and implementing as far as collaborating down the road. So just wanted to point that out as far as just kind of best practice here, because some of our listeners may be thinking about this and they may be a little reluctant because you say, I really have something that, either it's been know-how that we've kept as a trade secret. Mm-hmm. It's the way we're doing a method or a process better than others. But I want to know how to do it to even, make some improvements. Or I might want to know a way of being better efficient at doing this. And I don't want to lose that. And so how can I do that, but still at the same time, still help us grow? So
absolutely. It's bringing together the coalition of the willing, right? So I have a word that I made up. It's kind of a fun word. It's called coalition. So it's the, coalition, purposeful collisions of the coalition of the willing. And that's kind of what we're about, right? Is creating those coalitions with each other.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean we're looking at Cleveland. We're doing a lot of work here in Cleveland as far as, Parallax Advanced Research and Ohio Aerospace Institute. Our team here is working with LANDWERX, just on that effort that's really focused on urban ag and how can we help, the supply side with our knowledge here and LandWorks knowledge of, emerging tech and innovation, and how do we bring stakeholders together? And both our organizations really work at that neutral party. I'm going to use Brad's term
Yeah,
to
yeah.
facilitate these interactions between the demand and supply side. And so I guess from your viewpoint, Brad, you've worked really, as far as to implement kind of the LandWorks model and help found that model. I guess coming in and seeing Cleveland, we're in the Midwest here.
Mhm.
LandWorks has had a kind of center of operations here in Iowa, further in the Midwest here.
Mhm.
But what are some of the opportunities that you think are there on the horizon for Cleveland and really, the urban ag and maybe even a larger ag sector here.
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, first, I mean, I'd applaud Cleveland. They're kind of leaders in the space with this urban ag innovation push, right? And so working through Parallax and everything in partnership with you guys, I mean, we're super thankful for do that, but we're happy to serve Cuyahoga County and Cleveland. And I think just the forward lean that they're taking to say, hey, we're going to put some resources against this and some effort and some time into understanding what our urban agricultural community needs and wants and desires, what they're doing and where they are in their mission and their progress. What we want to do at LandWorks with in partnership with Parallax is to be able to, one, answer questions that they may have as a community, also plug them in with larger scale market research to identify novel solutions to problems that they outline and give, which Parallax and the team here has done an amazing job of collecting those. And so we're here to basically activate the ecosystem in support of those problems that are identified. And there's some great novel academic, laboratory type developments that are going on at large scale institutions. We have some pretty strong ties to the University of Florida, which is one of the number one agricultural schools in the nation. They have one of the fastest supercomputers in the world called a Hypergator. They can use, AI, different data sets and everything to support farming and ag. Working in the state of Ohio, working across all of the different innovation compounds with not just Parallax and other great partners, but also the university structure. So I think part of it is, again, bringing the ecosystem and that power of the collective together to look at the hard problems identified by the urban ag farmers in Cleveland. And I think the other thing is, like, once those are identified, I guarantee you, it's like being back in middle school or grade school when they say, no stupid questions, no question's a stupid question. If you raise your hand and ask, I'm sure that 10 other people have the same question. I think we're going to see a lot of that, right? And I think that this is the first kind of very pointy tip of the spear of a lot of good urban ag initiatives going across our nation. And I know that with the USDA leadership and some other leadership in the government, they're kind of pushing into this thing. How do we empower our innovative culture within the ag sector and national security sector? How do we empower them with tools, processes, and procedures to be better, to help each other, to develop novel things, and to kind of lead as a country into the space of developing novel, innovative solutions to empower agriculture? And so that's kind of what we're here for. I'm excited because I think Cleveland is kind of, like I said multiple times, leading the way. And I think that a lot of we've already talked to many other kind of urban cores, and there's kind of these great pockets of urban ag going on, but they're kind of, again, disparate and they're not talking to each other. Cleveland is like the first early adopter of really leaning into this, saying, hey, how do we bring our community together, understand the needs, understand the potential impacts, then go look for novel solutions? That is the start of a national movement and potentially international movement to basically uplift the community in some crazy ways that we've yet to be seen. So we're happy to be humble servants in that, and we're here to be a platform to help tie that in and empower that with proven process.
And you mentioned, a lot of potential here. I guess, also at the same time, you've seen, uh, some practices here where maybe we should take heed of what others have done and learned maybe some of the missteps as well. So I'm just curious along the lines here, any points of advice as far as for us? We're headed in our right direction, but what what words of wisdom would you share with us as well as far as moving forward?
No, it's a great question. It's one of my favorite. So I always talk about, there's always the lessons learned, or what I like to call, I mean, the impactful failures here. And so people in innovation always say, "Oh, fail fast." And I was like, "Yeah, but my caveat is don't make a habit of failure. If you're going to fail fast, yeah, you can do it, but don't fail that way again, right?" So the point of all this is not to fail. So what I would say is some great lessons learned is like one is don't do anything in a bubble. Right. So, be collaborative, be transparent to the core, to the maximum extent that you can to help others. Don't do things in bubbles that like, what if a novel thing is identified or a solution is implemented, yeah, of course we want, farmers, growers, developers to be successful business practitioners, but we also want to help the community writ large. So there's that. And that's where the non-traditional conversation creeps in, like kind of empowering the small business and the grower, right? And the urban ag specialist. So I think that, don't do things in bubbles. Collaborate early, often, always with the end users, right? Don't kind of never decide in your own corner of the room that you're the smartest person there and you don't need anybody else's help, because that's not how anything works. So that's what we call the kiss of death a lot in the government and the military, is that when we somehow sit in a room and everybody decides that we're the smartest people in the world on some topic, there's something seriously wrong with that room. And so collaboration is key, right? So transparency to the max and fullest extent is key. And I think communication, just like any good relationship, whether it's a husband, wife, whether it's a married relationship, whether it's a, whatever you're in, I think communication across these different sectors to empower each other is what really kind of helps float this. And so, lessons learned is, again, I mentioned some of them. One of my favorites is you can't force adoption. The best idea doesn't always win. That's just the nature of the beast. And so one other one is, one of my favorites is don't find users for solutions, find solutions for users, right? So, that's why the conversation and the upfront with the urban ag community is so important in the beginning, because we want to understand what their problem sets and their desirements, as I call them, are, instead of going out and trying to find shiny key objects and form fit in the bag and say, "Hey, look, I found you a solution." I said, "Well, we didn't ask for that." So really kind of, again, the way you empower is you listen, you understand, you transpose that into something tangible, and then you go out and accomplish the goals for them. And so that's kind of the cultural positioning that we're in. That's what we're here for. We're kind of on the build in a greatest way, and we're on the build in conjunction with the farmer and with the ag specialists and with national security experts. So I think this is the early stages of something extremely impactful and powerful for our country and for the world. And ag security and ag expertise is going to lead the way. So we're just very excited and humbled to be part of it.
Yeah, and you mentioned as far as the whole idea of just ag security here. Um, it may be an area we've taken for granted. I'm assuming that's an area that's, given just kind of our current environment, is going to be emphasized even more here. Um, I guess with this question here, if I'm urban farmer, or even a farmer in general, as far as in the ag area, what, I guess as far as what are you all seeing with respect to ag security? Is there specific aspects or innovations where on the demand side, supply side are getting together? And it's probably in two parts. It's kind of one more on the consumer sector standpoint, just in general, and then the government viewpoint. But what are you seeing kind of from those two pathways
Yeah, I mean,
with
I'll
respect to ag security?
I'll give you some sound bites that we've been kind of putting together and thinking about for, like, food security as national security. So
Mm.
advanced ag tech like precision farming, AI driven crop monitoring, climate resilient seeds, they help maintain stable food supplies and technologies. They reduce the dependence on foreign imports, and they mitigate the risk of food shortages during crisis and to mitigate further crisis. And so, different technologies and capabilities, they play a pivotal role in the strengthening of our national security by enabling and empowering that food security, economic stability, and resilience against global threats. So, with different climate changing things going on, population growth, geopolitical tensions, all of the things going on, we want to make sure we align ourselves with a platform that brings together the key players and again empowers the singular farmer and the urban ag farmer, but also just agricultural population in general to then play into their critical role in infrastructure, critical national security impact, food security, and land security. So that's those are some fun sound bites, but I mean, it gets into, again, I mentioned economic stability, supply chain resilience and stability, biosecurity and surveillance when it comes to, crop monitoring and surveillance of, nefarious things that might come in and affect our economic stability as agricultural impact. And strategic autonomy and other things like that are playing roles in this too. So again, bringing in novel solutions that have potentially been really impactful in the DoD sector and the government side or other, industry side, bringing those robotics, bringing those precision-fed agricultural technology impacts for autonomous systems and things like that to bear, I think is where we have to be to empower the next generation of ag, but also the farmers of today. Again, getting back to something you said that's critically important is you have to understand the cultural impacts of where they are today, where they want to be tomorrow, and where the future is headed. And you have to meet them at each part of that journey to say, yep, there's solutions you can implement now. There's things that you did in the past that you don't have to do, or things that you still can continue to do, but they can be enhanced in different ways to make you more effective. So hopefully that makes sense. But we are, as you can probably tell through my words, hyper focused on national security and food security and ag security. But also the backbone of that is empowering our ag sector for resiliency and better growth patterns.
Yeah, and I think you hit the second part really kind of probably from most folks as far as I definitely from a business standpoint, you mentioned as far as the food security, ag security, and really kind of, maintaining uh, a reliable supply. But I think on the flip side, from a consumer standpoint, you got climate change.
Absolutely.
We have more extreme weathers, especially domestically. It's the whole challenge of now having the available supply when needed for consumers. And I think it's become more evident as our weather conditions probably become more extreme during the seasons. And so I guess that whole piece here, you mentioned as far as resiliency here, and just trying to also the challenge of really we still have in urban areas and even rural areas food deserts
Of course. Yeah.
and getting the necessary food to people in need. Um, I guess, what are you all doing as far as what involvement maybe that you will have in that area? And I think, we look with respect to kind of innovation and just playing that role as far as a neutral party. You may have seen some activities in that space as well.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned a little bit about the food, supply chain security and like the optimization of that food supply chain, right? And so a lot of that gets in. I mean, there's so many layers of this, as you know, an expert in the space, and as urban ag and agricultural experts, and there's so many layers to the business side, but also just the logistical side of farm to table, right? For example, I mean, it seems simple, super simple when you say it, but it's not that simple when it gets to like consumer product and CPGs and other things and other companies that are large scale, companies that try to come in and they do good stuff. There's great, economic impact companies, there's great supplier companies, there's mom and pops, there's all these different things. But, we want to be a place where we can empower, we don't want to, have to look back and say, hey, there's a scarcity in food supply, right? Or there's, because of economic impact or inflation, it's not allowing certain urban core sectors to have access to healthy options of food for the future. Like that's what we're trying to stop. That's what we're trying to, have novel, impactful, not just technological solutions, but also policy impacts, right? And so driving that again, that all comes with transparency and getting the right key players involved in some of these larger conversations to say, hey, here's where the supply is. Here's where the food, the ag impact, here's where the crops come from. What is this chain of custody that goes on to get them to consumers that allows kind of that easy transition and like kind of lower reduced barrier to allow them to have access to healthy, sustainable, and better quality of food moving forward for their families. And so that's a lot of this. There'll be a lot. I mean, as you can tell, there's many layers of the proverbial onion here, using a farming quote here. So many layers of the onion. But as we peel this out, we're going to be very purposeful. So the purposeful nature of this is moving forward. We're going to identify solutions. We're going to allow and enhance the idea of novel developers and garage tinkerers and non-traditionals to bring their potential ideas in and help them implement those at large scale and find opportunity spaces. We're going to work with the federal government and other people to make sure that we're empowering the populace through some of the initiatives that they want to do. And we're going to strengthen the core of our agricultural security and national security through this. And so I think there's a lot to that, but like you mentioned, supply chain resiliency and just understanding kind of that chain of custody and that transparent access to better quality and more robust food supply is a massively important one for our country. I live in the land of hurricanes, so I get when the shelves empty out really early on with the threat of hurricanes. And so we got to be better at that as a nation, and we're here to try to help implement solutions for that.
Yeah. Definitely it's, twofold, well, it's multifold as far as really some of the challenges here, continue to, create opportunities here within the space for innovations, but also to bring the stakeholders together to really kind of look at how collectively, and we as an ecosystem can resolve, and meet needs and resolve challenges here.
Yeah, one thing,
So,
so sorry to pick one more thing, just give a props here. So I think urban ag plays a huge role in this. Like, I think that, the urban agricultural innovator leaning into this and kind of being that, we'll call it non-traditional space of like, hey, getting access or creating access to good supply chains of, fresh, awesome, good nutrients, based foods for the urban population is vital. It's vital to the core of the mission of doing this. And so that's why we're so humbled and proud to be part of the effort with Parallax for Cuyahoga County and Cleveland. And we couldn't be happier with Cleveland leading the way and trying to help them empower them to do great things for the future.
yeah. One last question here. Really kind of looking, and really just some advice for our listeners here, you know, especially for our next generation of growers and tech leaders. What is that one piece of advice that you would like to leave them with here? And I kind of pick, this question says kind of next generation of growers and tech leaders is kind of really that's twofold as far as the questions. But what piece of advice would you give for each one of those respective groups in the audience here?
Yeah, I mean, a couple ones that I've learned, I mean, that helped me and served me, but also like things I would tell my 16-year-old daughter, right? So one is always be inquisitive, always be interactive, right? So lean into it. Don't be quiet. Raise your hand, ask questions, be involved, and take this as an action. Like if this is a call to action for you, then I'm happy to be that. So get involved. So if you have great ideas, if you have hard problems, if you have, different novel thoughts, like bring it to the community and work cohesively together in that communicative way. Be transparent with each other, lift up each other, always start things with how can we help, right? So I think, part of like I mentioned, I used to have a rule on these brainstorming things. So I used to run some of the some of the key brainstorming events for special operations and a lot of some fun stuff like that. And one of my rules was you can't, again, I mentioned this, you can't start a sentence with the word you can't because. You have one time, you get one strike and you're out, right? And you get asked to leave the meeting. But you can start sentences with what if you could. So I think if the community writ large, especially these urban ag folks, these are probably the best people at this because they've been quote unquote resource constrained in an environment that is not very conducive to what they're trying to accomplish, but they've been successful anyway, and they're pushing past the boundaries and the limitations that are known. What if you could create a sustainable core of agricultural development in an urban environment? What if you could create, a novel platform that allowed those different best lessons learned and growers and innovators to come together and cohesively develop novel things for the future of farming that could teach everybody, not just in urban cores, but in rural environments, in, international settings where you don't have access to some of the technologies and developments that we might hear be afforded in the United States. So get involved, always be inquisitive, share with each other, and always start your sentences with what if you could, and lean in and don't take no for an answer if you're passionate about something. So have passion driven innovation lead every day.
Yeah, great. Great. That's a good way to really, just wrap up this conversation. And thank you, Brad, for this insightful conversation. And thanks to our listeners for joining us on this third episode of Tech to Table, Growing Cleveland's Future. Stay tuned for our fourth episode, Tech on the Ground, Community Voices, where we'll hear directly from the growers, beekeepers, and community leaders using these new technologies every day. Guests will include local urban farmers from Hood Honey and Food Strong, who will share their insights on accessibility, lived experience, and the real impact of smart farming tech on Cleveland's neighborhoods. You won't want to miss it.